Story 1. The Man in the Lobby. My name is Alex, and I'm 26. About 6 months ago, I was working the night shift at a small motel off a quiet highway. It was a 24-room place, rarely more than a third full, and my shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The job was dull: check in late arrivals, monitor the cameras, and tidy up the front desk. The lobby was basic: a counter, a couple of armchairs, a coffee machine, and a small TV in the corner. Behind the desk was a tiny office with a computer and a window to keep an eye on the lobby. The front doors locked at night, and guests had to buzz to get in. Most nights nothing happened after 1 a.m., but one night changed that forever. Around midnight, the buzzer went off. I let in a guy in his late 30s, average build, wearing a dark jacket and a beanie, carrying a duffel bag. He asked for a room, and I quoted the rate. He paid with a card, which went through fine, and I handed him a key for room 312 on the 3rd floor. His stare lingered on me a bit too long, maybe 5 seconds, before he nodded and headed to the elevator. It felt off, but I brushed it aside and went back to scrolling on my phone. By 1:30 a.m., I noticed him back in the lobby, sitting in an armchair, staring at the blank TV. He wasn't reading. Wasn't on his phone, just sitting there, still as a statue. I figured he couldn't sleep. Guests sometimes hung out in the lobby, but it unnerved me. When I crossed the lobby to grab a snack from the vending machine, I felt his eyes follow me the whole way. I avoided looking at him, but the weight of his stare made my skin crawl. At 2 a.m., I checked the reservation system out of boredom and saw room 312 listed as vacant. Confused, I checked the check-in log. No record of him. The transaction history showed no card payment either. My stomach sank. I distinctly remembered swiping his card and the machine beeping. I called room 312, but it rang unanswered. The keycard log showed no entry to the room. He'd never gone upstairs. I glanced at the lobby. He was still there, staring at the TV. Heart pounding, I debated what to do. At 2:30 a.m., he was gone from the armchair. I scanned the lobby and spotted him standing in the shadowed corner by the vending machines, motionless, watching me. I pretended to work on the computer, my hands shaking. He moved again, this time to the hallway near the stairs, just standing there. I called my supervisor, who told me to monitor him and call the police if he got aggressive. It already felt aggressive. Checking the cameras, I saw him wandering the first-floor hallway, stopping at a guest's door for minutes before returning to the lobby. By 3 a.m., I called the non-emergency police line, explaining there was a man in the motel who wasn't a guest. While waiting, he moved closer, standing 10 feet from the desk, staring at me with a blank expression. I mumbled about checking something on the computer, barely breathing. At 3:45 a.m., the buzzer rang, a late guest. I let them in, and the man's eyes tracked them across the lobby like he was sizing them up. By 4 a.m., he was back at a guest's door on the camera feed, just standing there. I called 911, whispering that a non-guest was loitering outside rooms. Minutes later, he returned to the lobby, walked to the desk, and leaned over, asking if there was a microwave. His voice was flat, almost mechanical. I pointed to the vending area, and he smirked before walking away. At 4:20 a.m., police arrived. I pointed him out in the armchair. They questioned him, checked his ID, and escorted him out. An officer told me his card was stolen, and he had no reservation. He'd faked the check-in to get inside. They charged him with trespassing and fraud. I shook for the rest of my shift, checking cameras constantly, expecting to see him again. Knowing he'd been wandering the motel for hours, watching me and standing outside guest rooms still makes my blood run cold. I don't know what he wanted, but I'm certain it wasn't good. Story 2. The woman in the lot. I'm Sarah, 22, and I work nights at a 24-hour convenience store on a lonely stretch of road. It's a small place, just gas pumps, snacks, and a coffee station. I took the job because it's quiet, and I like the solitude, usually. My shift is 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and most nights it's just truckers or late-night travelers. But last month something happened that still haunts me. At 1 a.m., a woman walked in. She was maybe 50 with a worn coat and tangled hair, carrying a small purse. She didn't browse, just stood near the counter staring at me. "Hey," I said, trying to sound friendly. "You work late?" she replied, her voice low, like she already knew me. "Yeah, night shift," I said, uneasy. She smiled thinly and said, "I've seen you here before. You always arrange the candy bars so neatly." I forced a laugh, but my name tag was in the back, and I hadn't written anything public like a store sign. She lingered, not buying anything, then left without a word. She started showing up every few nights, sometimes coming inside, sometimes just sitting in a beat-up sedan at the edge of the lot, lights off. One night she came in and said, "You're always alone here, aren't you? Must be scary for a young woman." Her tone was calm, curious, which made it worse. I mumbled, "I'm fine," and asked if she needed anything. She pointed to the back door. "You check that lock every night around 3 a.m. Smart." My heart stopped. She'd been watching me that closely. She left after that, but I started carrying pepper spray. A week later, I found a folded note on the counter after a break. It was a sketch of me stocking shelves with "Careful Sarah" written in sharp, slanted handwriting. I hadn't told her my name. The next time she came in, I confronted her, saying she needed to stop or I'd call the police. She tilted her head and said, "I'm just observant. I thought you'd like someone who notices you." I snapped. "That's not noticing, that's creepy." She didn't react, just left. I called the police the next night when I saw her car again, parked in the shadows. They found her in the lot, and in her car was a notebook with my schedule, descriptions of my outfits, even notes about my habits, like how I hum when I mop. She claimed she was just curious, but they issued a restraining order. I switched to day shifts at another store an hour away. Even now, when I see a car idling too long, I grip my keys tighter, and her voice, saying my name like she owned it, still echoes in my head. Story 3. The shadow at the counter. I'm Jake, 27, and I work the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner in a small town. It's a no-frills place, booths, a counter, and a jukebox that barely works. My shift is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and it's usually just me, a cook in the back, and a handful of regulars. The diner has a bell above the door that chimes when someone enters, and a small office behind the counter where I do paperwork. I like the quiet, but last winter something happened that changed how I see the place. At 2 a.m., the bell chimed. I walked out from the office, but the diner was empty. No customers, no cars in the lot, just the hum of the fridge. I figured the wind rattled the door and went back to my laptop. 10 minutes later, it chimed again, still empty. My skin prickled, but I told myself it was nothing. I checked outside, shining my phone's flashlight across the lot. Nothing but parked guest cars and an empty road. I stayed at the counter after that, watching the door. At 2:30 a.m., the bell rang again. I looked up, nobody. I checked the booths, the restrooms, even the kitchen. Empty. I sat back down, heart racing, and turned the radio low to stay alert. At 3 a.m., it happened again, but this time I saw a shadow move under the counter, like someone was crouching there. I froze, then leaned over. Nothing. The space was too small for anyone to fit comfortably, but I'd seen it. At 3:30 a.m., the bell rang, and a hand reached up from under the counter, tapping the service bell right in front of me. I stumbled back, knocking over a stool, and ran to the office, locking the door. On the security feed, I saw a figure crawl out, tall, hooded, face obscured, pacing the diner. They stopped at the door, staring out, then flipped through the menu on the counter like nothing was wrong. I called 911, whispering that someone had broken in. The figure moved to the hallway by the office, and the doorknob rattled